Good morning, 7th grade. Happy Thursday. Lost track of the days. But it was really nice to see you guys yesterday in the Zoom as we talked about the steamboats in the beginning of the transportation revolution. Today we're going to go ahead and talk about the railroads. And the railroads were the ones that really changed everything. And we know now, like, there's trains, we have the metros and everything like that. So when the trains were first introduced to America, people were going crazy for them. And it was something that changed everything. So we're going to talk about that. But first, let's go ahead and review the questions from yesterday. So number one, what benefits did the transportation revolution bring to trade and daily life? So some of the benefits that happened was trade was increasing. People are now able to trade a lot further distances. More people had access to goods. It reduced the shipping time, the shipping costs. So trade was just expanding and it just became easier to trade. For daily life, it connected people. So now people are able to stay connected, they're able to communicate faster, news is able to travel faster, and everyone is just getting excited to explore. Number two, why were steamboats well suited for river travel? So steamboats, they're well suited for river travel now because now they didn't rely on paddles or sails or the wind, and now they can travel upstream because they have engines. Number three, why do you think Ogden did not want Gibbons to operate steamboat services in New York? Reason why is that we talked about it, like he tried to make money off them. He tried to tax them, saying if you're going to use my river, you're going to have to pay. So Ogden was trying to get money off Gibbons and try to use the river as part of his business. But we all know that was not right because the river is free for everybody. And number four, explain the effects of Gibbons and Ogden's rulings. So some of the effects that happened from the ruling was now river travel was free for everybody. They didn't have to worry about anybody trying to put taxes on the river. Anybody can travel, and now trade was increasing because of this river travel. Okay, so that's what we talked about yesterday. Let's go ahead and talk about what we're going to learn today. So yesterday we talked about the steamboats and the beginning of the transportation revolution. Today, like I said, we're going to talk about the railroads. And we're going to be able to explain how the railroads were extremely important to the transportation revolution. So let's go ahead and get into the content. So the railroads. So what the steamboat did for water travel, the train did for overland trade. So the steamboat was the new invention for water. The train was a new thing for land. Steam-powered trains were first developed in Great Britain in the early 1800s. However, they did not become popular in the United States until 1830. And it was all due to this race right here. So in 1830, Peter Cooper, he built this small, powerful locomotive called the Tom Thumb, which you see right there. And he raced his train or his locomotive against a horse. And pretty much back then, remember, everything was driven by a horse. So horses were pulling things. So Cooper, he was like, you know what? I'm going to take the technology from the trains or from the boats and put it on a train. And I'm going to show you how fast and how much easier it is. And we don't need horses anymore to pull things. So they started to race. They invited people to come watch the train race and everything like that. And at first, the train was losing. The horses started off really fast because, it takes a little while for the train to get moving. So the horses took off in the lead and everyone was like, oh, this train is not going to work. Eventually, as the steam engine started to kick in and it started to gain speed, it eventually caught up to the horse. But since they were doing a straightaway race and it took a little bit too long, the horse actually won the race, barely beat the Tom Thumb or this locomotive. But even though the Tom Thumb lost, this was extremely important because even though they lost, the contest showed how powerful and the speed of a small locomotive. So they showed like, wow, this engine can really pull a lot of weight, it can really pick up speed, and it's going to be perfect for trade. So railroad fever soon began to spread, and everybody wanted to build railroads, and they wanted to start using these new steam-powered trains because they said this is way better than horses. Now we can give the horses a rest, and we can start building these trains, and we can go longer distances and faster at a faster pace. So within 10 years, this is the amazing thing. Within 10 years, railroad companies had already laid about 2,800 miles of track. And in that 10-year span, they had more railroads than all of Europe, which is amazing because they brought this idea from Europe to the United States. But they became the best, and they started to build huge railroads for these trains. But as more railroads were being built, engineers and mechanics, they had to overcome many tough challenges, like you see right here. So in the US, if you know, the land isn't always flat. There's a lot of mountains, there's rivers, there's canyons, and this caused a lot of trouble and a lot of problems because now they had to build these railroads, and if they're gonna be able to connect everybody, they're gonna have to build across these bridges or build across these canyons. So you can see like that's the railroad right there. That's how they did. People used to just stand down the railroads. But everything you see, notice how they had to build the train tracks. And this was a challenge because not many people knew how to build railroads. So they had to build railroad tracks like around tight corners, up and down steep mountains, across rivers, and eventually they had to find materials and get more materials to build these areas. Okay? So as time went on, the engineers, the mechanics, they were able to build heavier, faster steam engines, and they were able to make more and more railroad tracks. But there was some problems. In 1860, the railroad business boomed and it went crazy, and they built about 30,000 miles of railroads, and this linked almost every single major city in the eastern part of the US, and this was mostly in the northern part of the US. We did the math. 30,000 miles is about from here to the moon and back. That's how much railroad track was laid down. And just think about this, railroads only became popular in the United States in 1830. So 30 years they built 30,000 miles of track, which is crazy. Because of this, the railroad companies became some of the most powerful and wealthiest companies across the nation because more and more people were investing in these railroads. Because of this, the economy surged. The economy started to gain momentum, it started to boom, and the railroads became the most powerful businesses in the country. Not only did the railroads allow manufacturers and farmers to ship their goods across distant lands and connect everybody through this trade, but everyone started to get excited about the railroads. Just like how we were when we rode Thunder Mountain, how we get all excited and they say, this here is the wildest ride in the wilderness. Well, that was true. So riding the railroads was faster and it was like an adventure. Just like riding a train was an adventure, this was the first time they ever had something like this. So they were extremely happy. So many people were starting to invest and just buy railroad tickets. And all they wanted to do was just ride the railroads. They wanted to get out and about, and they wanted to go see what was out there. So a lot of these citizens were starting to buy tickets on these railroads and just going to explore. Kind of like you guys. The Gold Line or the metros, when that opened up, now we're able to just ride the train and go see where it takes us. For example, like we can go to Santa Monica Pier now. We can go all the way to Hollywood, Universal Studios. So these trains connected people and allowed people to go to places they never thought they would go. So to this day, people are still loving and riding trains. Because of this, ever since the 1800s, trains became known as the greatest invention to this date. Okay? Not only did trains allow for adventure, but it also created these things called time zones. If you guys know, like we're 3 hours behind New York, Midwest is 2 hours ahead of us. These are different time zones, and they didn't happen until the railroads. And the reason why is because they wanted to make sure that the railroads were on time and on schedule when they're traveling from city to city. So they had to go through these time zones because it didn't make sense that the railroad was leaving at 4 p.m. in New York and was arriving at 4 p.m. or arriving at 7 p.m. in Chicago. When people would wait there, the train would never show up because the time zones were different. So this is why they created time zones for people. So the trains did a lot more than just connect people together. So as a quick review, how did the railroads play a vital part? So at first the railroads came and it was extremely important. We talked about the race between the Tom Thumb. We talked about how even though it lost to the horse, it got a lot of interest and people were really excited about these trains because now they saw how powerful they were, how fast they could be, and what they can actually do. Some of the problems they had with the railroad industry was building around the steep hills, the up and down curves, up and down over rivers, but eventually they had to figure it out. The U.S. railroad system boomed, and in a matter of 30 years, they had over 30,000 miles of track, which is ridiculous. Not only did the railroad industry become the most powerful and the most wealthy industry in the world, but this also helped connect people together, sending goods to distant markets. And it also allowed people to become very curious about riding trains. Because of this, people started to just ride trains just for fun, and they were getting excited just to go and see what was on the other side or just to see what railroads were all about. This was just something that it was like a brand new roller coaster for them. So this is why railroads were so important during the transportation revolution. For homework, I would like you guys to answer these 3 questions. Number 1, in what ways did railroads affect the economy of the US? So how did they improve the economy? Remember about all the investors. Number 2, why do you think the railroad companies became some of the nation's most powerful businesses? So why do you think these people became so powerful? Think about what the railroads are doing, and if the railroads are doing this, how does this make this business really powerful? And number 3, what was the significance of 1830 race involving the Tom Thumb? So think about the race. Although the train lost, what was so important about what was the results of this train race? So that concludes our lesson today about the railroad tracks and the trains. I thought it was really cool to know a little bit more about the trains. We'll talk about it tomorrow during our Zoom session, because I really want you guys to understand how important the trains really were and what they really did for the United States. But if you guys have any questions, just let me know. I'm here to help you. If not, I will see you guys all tomorrow at 10 a.m. for another Zoom session. Hopefully some of you guys have created the Kahoot so we can play some more Kahoot. By the way, thank you again, Juan, for that Kahoot. That was really fun. I appreciate it. With that being said, I'll see you guys all tomorrow.